What's up guys, Nito here and welcome back. So today I'm playing a new build and this is a Deadeye Windburst character. And Windburst is a new support gem that was added in 3.27 and it basically supports any attack skill, and when you hit the enemy with the attack it will fire off 3 projectiles, which are these little tornadoes. So I'll just show you what that looks like. So there you go, those are the tornadoes. They kind of bounce around. They bounce off walls, and they can each hit the enemy once each time it hits a wall. So basically, it can repeatedly hit the same enemy as long as it's bounced off of something. And then at the end of their duration, they explode. And the explosion does 40% more damage. So it is a duration skill, so you want to scale increased duration so that they last longer, and it's projectile, so you can scale additional sources of projectiles. In this case, I'm using Fury Valve, which gives you 2 additional projectiles, and it makes modifiers to number of projectiles instead apply to the number of targets that you split towards. So because Windburst has 3 base projectiles, you're always going to get 3 projectiles minimum, and then each of those is going to split towards the total number of additional projectiles that you have. So in this case, I have 2 from the amulet, I have 2 from the Deadeye Ascendancy, I have 1 from the tree over here, and then I have 4 extra from Greater Volley Support. So you can see that we are splitting towards 9 additional targets. So we have 3 base projectiles that each split 9 times. So that's a lot of projectiles. And then we also use Sniper's Mark, which also allows them to split even more. So we basically just have a ton of tornado projectiles bouncing around everywhere. And the interesting thing about Windburst is that you can only trigger it after you've moved 10 meters. So it kind of scales based off of movement speed as opposed to something like attack speed. So attack speed doesn't matter at all unless you need it for the skill that you're triggering with. And the tech that I found is that with Cyclone of Tumult, so this is the alternate version of of Cyclone. Regular Cyclone normally has a pretty significant less movement speed modifier while you're cycloning, which is not ideal because we want to be moving as fast as possible in order to trigger Windburst as much as possible. But Cyclone of Tumult doesn't gain the less movement speed until it generates a stage. See how it says 10% less movement speed per stage? So what you can do, it'll only gain a stage every 0.4 seconds while channeling. And since we don't really care about Cyclone's damage itself, what you can do is you can just tap it, and you won't actually generate a stage unless you hold it down. See, you can see up here, these are my Cyclone stages, right? But if I'm just tapping it, we're never actually gaining a stage, so we're moving at full speed. But we still are going to be hitting enemies because it's going to attack this, right as you hit it, it's going to do an attack. So you don't have to wait to gain stages to actually start hitting anything, right? And then because we're Deadeye, we also have Gale Force, which normally while channeling, you're not going to gain additional stacks of Gale Force. But if you're tapping it, each time you tap it, you're going to gain a stack, right? And that's going to make you move faster. It gives you more action speed. So that's kind of the tech here. And then, again, because Windburst doesn't care about attack speed, we're using Marohi Urki, which has super slow attack speed, but super high base damage. So that's kind of the general idea. And then we're using the Worm Ring. I'll explain that later, but yeah, I'll do a quick map, kind of show you what it looks like. So basically, we just kind of run around, proc a bunch of tornadoes. They kind of just bounce off of everything. And I will note that this build is like way better in indoor maps. You generally don't want to do an open map. Like Dunes is probably like the worst map for this build because your tornadoes are just gonna like fly off and not bounce off of anything and never return. And most of your damage comes from the tornadoes bouncing around and repeatedly hitting enemies. So you kind of want to be running pretty indoor maps are like just maps with a lot of stuff to a lot of terrain, a lot of stuff to bounce off of. So. As you can see, visual clarity can be a little bit of an issue for this build. You pretty much can't see anything in boss arenas, which is slightly problematic. But yeah, it's otherwise pretty good at mapping, though. I will say the damage is very inconsistent, because if you're not in a open area, I mean, if you are in an open area, like not being able to bounce off of anything, your damage will be far lower than what you see here, where I have obviously pretty tight quarters where you can bounce quite a bit. So because of that, I don't plan on really like pushing this build too much further. It's a decent mapper, but it's not crazy. Even though it looks pretty crazy. It's a very fun build, but I feel like there's only so much you can do to scale it past a certain level. But that said, yeah, it's very fun to just like watch the tornadoes bounce around everywhere. But yeah, the inconsistency makes it less fun for me to play in a lot of maps, or like boss arenas. Like, the bigger the boss arena, the worse the damage is going to be, basically. Like, a boss arena like this is pretty good because it's obviously pretty small area and there's a lot of stuff to bounce off of, but overall it's going to be pretty inconsistent. Let me take that off just so that we stop spawning worms and tornadoes. Okay, so yeah, like I said, Cyclone of Tumult, we just tap it, we move really quickly, as you saw. Every 10 meters you move, you trigger a Windburst, and then Windburst fires 3 projectiles, which all split like 9 times, and then those projectiles can all split even more because of Sniper's Mark, and yeah, shit just goes pretty crazy. So, yeah, the idea was to build around Brohi Urki because it has super high flat fizz on it. And then the rest of our items, we're doing Foulborn Devotos, which gives 20% increased movement speed. Obviously, that's really important. The Foulborn version also gives you a bunch of suppress, which is nice. I believe that replaces dexterity, so it's a pretty good trade-off, in my opinion. I think this item is actually, like, kind of slept on, honestly. It's, like, quite strong. It goes up to 20% spell suppress, 20% movement speed, attack speed, and then has a good amount of armor and evasion. So, yeah, it's a pretty solid item. And then the other thing I'm doing is using Foulborn Perfect Form. So this item, I think, is really underrated. It's like 1C. It has Ghost Dance instead of Acrobatics. So normally Perfect Form gives you Acrobatics, which is this keystone right here, which is going to convert all of your spell suppress chance into spell dodge, right? And that's usually a downside because suppression is generally very strong, and most people prefer having suppression in their build instead of acrobatics. Instead of spell dodge. And basically, in order to get to 75% spell dodge, which is the cap, you would have to have 150% suppress chance, which is pretty hard to get on a lot of builds anyway. So usually people prefer suppression. The great thing about this Foulborn version is that it gives you Ghost Dance instead, which already Ghost Dance is an amazing keystone for any evasion build. Almost any evasion build is going to want it. Currently, I'm not taking advantage of it like that much because I don't really have energy shield, because Ghost Dance restores your energy shield when you're hit based on how much evasion you have. But this removes the downside of having the acrobatics on there, and you still get 50% chance to suppress spell damage from this chest, which is massive. And then on top of that, you also get evasion rating scaled by your overcapped cold resistance. And the chest just has a lot of evasion on it. It has no life mods on it, so you can use the 15% life mastery. So just a really good option for evasion builds, in my opinion. And it means you don't have to path up to Ghost Dance. So it opens up a lot of options. I think this is a really cool and kind of slept on chest this patch, and it's super cheap. So we're using that, and then we're using the Squirming Terror ring, which summons the worms automatically every 2 seconds. And that's basically, it's having an additional target for us to hit when we're running around, because sometimes it can be a little hard to like keep hitting, like on a single target, it can be a little hard to keep hitting them with your Cyclone, because you're basically running back and forth like past them, or you're like running in circles around them, but you have to be close enough to actually hit them because we don't have much AoE on our Cyclone. So having an extra target to hit from the worms, kind of nice. It's also an extra target for your projectiles to split off of, because sometimes if you only have the 3 projectiles come out, they might not immediately split because they might like miss the enemy or whatever. So having those extra worms is pretty good. But the really nice thing is that because you're killing something every 2 seconds, you can take better advantage of like on kill effects. So in particular, we have onslaught on kill, and we have increased effective onslaught. So that's a lot of extra movement speed that we get from having that. And again, movement speed translates into damage basically, because it's allowing us to proc our Windburst more often. So that's pretty important. Also, you can do like phasing on kill right here. I ended up dropping this just because my points are pretty tight right now on the tree. But it does help a little bit because like you have phasing while cycloning, but because we're not fully cycloning all the time, you basically sometimes will get a little bit stuck in packs if you're not like tapping it frequently, or if you're not like holding it down. So it can be nice to have just have some uptime on phasing there. You can also do things like overcharge, giving charges on kill, stuff like that. Like, yeah, there's a lot you can do with on kill effects. So it's just nice to have that. And then we're also triggering Tornado on kill. There's a 24% chance to trigger the socketed spell every time you kill something. And since we're able to kill constantly, even on single target. Like we're going to be triggering Tornado, and Tornado can be hit by our Windburst tornadoes, and it reflects some of the damage onto the enemy. So that's just extra damage from that as well. So that's why we use that ring. Our other ring is just pretty basic, life, res. I need a bunch of strength because obviously Marohi Urki has a pretty high strength requirement. Currently, I'm just using Belted Deceiver. This character is not like fully fleshed out. Obviously, you want a better belt than this. But, you know, Intimidation is good, and we take more damage. And all our damage is pure Fizz because we are using Brutality. So Global Fizz is pretty good as well. The other gloves, we have a lot of accuracy on here to make up for the minus 500 to accuracy rating on Marohi. Accuracy is kind of hard to fix in this build, so we have to use a lot of flat accuracy on the gloves currently, and then also we're running precision, and we have like a little bit of accuracy here on the tree, and we are using precise techniques, so we want to make sure that our accuracy is higher than our max life. We have a pretty low life pool at the moment, so, you know, we are a pretty squishy Deadeye, which is one of the reasons I don't plan on pushing this build too much further, because it is quite squishy at the moment. And it's more or less a melee playstyle, even though you are moving around really quickly. You are often in melee range, so squishy in melee range feels kind of bad sometimes. And then inconsistent damage, like I said, also feels kind of bad, but like, in general, just zooming around in indoor maps is a lot of fun, so I do like the build, but I probably won't keep playing it too much longer. So yeah, we're doing that, and then gloves also have projectile speed. You want to get as much projectile speed as possible in this build, because the faster your tornadoes move, the faster they can bounce off something and come back and hit the same enemy again. Because, again, tornadoes, they aren't quite like Spark, where they can hit the same enemy every like 0.66 seconds or whatever. I did a bunch of testing with it, and it seems that they are coded so that they hit, like, each projectile can hit the same enemy once per bounce. So you have to actually hit a wall and come back and then hit the same enemy again. So yeah, it's not just like I tested this with really slow projectile speed, where the tornadoes were basically just sitting on top of the enemy, and they would only hit the enemy once. So yeah, you do want as much projectile speed as possible. So because of that, we have it crafted on the gloves. We also get a bunch from Fury Valve itself, and then our Anoint is more also projectile speed and projectile damage and strength. And then we have Long Shot down here, which gives proj speed. We have the Mastery for more projectile speed. We're a Deadeye, so we get a little bit from like the Ascendancy, these two nodes. And then we have like Far Shot and Endless Munitions as well. I'll go over all that in a sec. But yeah, so basically you just want projectile speed wherever you can get it, because it pretty much directly translates into additional damage. And then we have Rage on hit, because we're an attack build, and Rage is just more damage for attacks. And then you might be wondering why I have Cold Exposure on hit. And the reason is because of this graft. The Preserving Stillness graft gives you a buff which takes elemental damage from hits when you inflict exposure. So it gives you basically a little, like, nice little defensive buff. And since we're hitting so often, we can inflict exposure very frequently and trigger this on cooldown, basically. So it's just like a nice thing to have. It just, like, because our life pool is so low, it's just like some extra life. And then also the graft itself also has increased proj speed on it, so that's another source of proj speed that we can get. And then boots, you just want as much movement speed as possible, obviously, and then you want like action speed implicit, or just more movement speed. And if you're not taking this node on the tree, then you probably want onslaught on kill on the boots as well. yeah, so that's pretty much the gear currently. And then, so for our tree, our ascendancy, we're just, yeah, Deadeye. We take Far Shot because obviously we want that more damage the further the projectiles have traveled, because the projectiles are traveling all over the place. So we pretty much always are going to have that 30% more damage. It's pretty big. Endless munitions for extra projectiles. Gathering Winds for Tailwind. And like I said, you can do that tech where, because we're like just pulsing Cyclone, we're getting Gale Force generated pretty easily, and that's giving us even more action speed. So it's like 16% action speed from that, which is really good for this build. And then Focal Point, increased effective marks, so we're increasing the effect of our Sniper's Mark. That combined with this cluster right here means that we split towards 4 additional targets instead of 2. And then we have the Mark Mastery to gain frenzy charges on hit. Yeah, and that's pretty much the Ascendancy. I'm not using any of the Bloodline Ascendancies right now. I was considering trying to make the Tull Ascendancy work where you have empty sockets on your gear, because I think that I have a bunch of stuff I don't actually really need on here, and I can kind of like condense things into being able to use like only having the chest with socketed stuff and having helmet, gloves, and boots with empty sockets, and then also have our main 6-link in the Marohi. I think that would be possible to do on this build. It would just take some tweaking of the build, and I would also have to go find the find all and kill it, which I haven't done yet. So for now, we're just a regular Deadeye. So for the rest of the tree, obviously the main event is happening right here, and what we're doing is we're using the Light of Meaning Jewel with increased physical damage. So that's going to give us 6% phys damage from all of these small nodes here. Like everything in this radius is getting 6% phys damage. And then here we're using Foulborn Might of the Meek, the small version, which gives you 100% increased effect of non-keystone passive skills in the radius, but also makes notables do nothing. So because these are overlapping, you actually get doubled the effect from Light of Meaning. So we actually get 12% phys damage on all these nodes, and then also double the effect of whatever it's giving. So like these movement speed nodes are normally 3%, and now they're giving 6% movement speed. So that's pretty powerful. The Foulborn version of Might of the Meek is also pretty interesting here in the Scion area, because normally Might of the Meek has a large radius, and it ends up overlapping a bunch of these notables, like these two as well. Like if you were to put it here, it would overlap all of this stuff, and it disables notables. So it means you can't get Constitution, you can't get Path of the Warrior, you can't get Path of the Hunter, you can't get Reflexes. Like all of that would be disabled. So the smaller or the medium version can be pretty nice for like selectively not like overlapping some of those notables, which is kind of cool. And then we're also taking the skill effectoration and more skill effectoration mastery right here, which is pretty important because our Windburst tornadoes last for a duration of like 10.5 seconds with this, and then we have Unnatural Instinct here, which is hitting hitting these two nodes. That's another 20% skill effectoration. And then we're using more duration support as well. So that's 50% more, 49% more. So yeah, that's how you get like a longer duration, and that kind of translates directly to more damage as long as you have more things to bounce off of, basically. So yeah, that's pretty cool that you get to scale it from skill effectoration and projectile speed and movement speed. Those are like the 3 like extra scaling vectors that you get to do with Windburst. So, and then yeah, like this spot for Might of the Meek is kind of nice for Foulborn specifically, because you hit all these res clusters or res nodes, which give you 36% of each resistance, which is quite a lot. It does disable this one, notable, which is normally 10% all res, so you lose that, but you still get a lot out of having it in this spot right here. And then we also get proj damage. We get the movement speed, proj damage here. And then because we have Unnatural Instinct here, it's giving us all of these smaller nodes in the area, which also includes the fizz damage from like this stuff, which normally we wouldn't, you wouldn't get cast speed on this build, or like you wouldn't really care about mana or whatever, but we get it just because Unnatural Instinct allocates it for us, basically. And then like these nodes right here, normally they're 8% fizz damage nodes, but now they're 28% fizz damage because of being doubled from this, and then also getting the extra 6% fizz damage from there. And then this one's like 32% fizz damage. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff to be had here, especially for fizz scaling. One thing I'll note, like I wanted to actually use, there's a new ring that scales your aura effect of physical aura skills off of increases to physical damage, which it's normally kind of hard to get an increase to global physical damage. It's usually specific to like physical attack damage or physical spell damage, or like, it's usually specific to something. So getting global physical damage from Light of Meaning in this setup in the center here, you can get quite a bit, and then that can translate into scaling your physical auras like Pride, Flesh and Stone, and Determination. And then also it can scale Blasphemy auras. So you can scale as long as the curse has the correct tag. So if you're doing Vulnerability Curse as a Blasphemy aura, you could scale that as well. So I ended up not doing that ring for this particular build, but I want to revisit it in another build because I think it's a pretty powerful interaction, and I think that there's the Light of Meaning tech in the center here, giving you a ton of increased damage of a specific type, because you can get increased fizz, or you can get any of the damage types on Light of Meaning. So depending on which aura type, like which auras you want to run, it can be really strong here. And then we also have like tattoos here for prod speed, which also gets doubled by Might of the Meek, and then one for some life leech. And then Iron Grip, because we do have, some strength to use our Marohi, so we can convert that into physical attack damage. So that's kind of the main setup here, and we also got a little bit of spell suppression and evasion and stuff there. Extra evasion from our body armor, stuff like that. We are also using Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame to get Bark Skin. Bark Skin is another... where is it? This guy. So it gives you basically minus 60 physical damage per bark, up to 10 barks. So it's just flat fizz reduction, which is pretty nice. And then each time you get hit, you lose one bark, but then you get more chance to evade. So it's a way to like juice up your evasion chance quite a bit. I think it's pretty underrated. I think Barkskin's really good in general. And this patch, it got buffed because they removed the reservation cost of it. So these Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame jewels are quite cheap, and they're I would say pretty good defensive option on any ranger build, that particularly ones that use evasion. And for the rest of the tree, we do have some extra accuracy and chance to blind right here. And then we're just kind of focused on getting a bunch of reservation stuff over there and over here. And then we have the Mana Mastery to get some additional mana reservation efficiency. And as you can see, we reserve almost our whole mana pool. We're running Grace, Precision, Pride, and Flesh and Stone, and Barkskin. And then, we just have like some reduced mana cost stuff there. We come up here for multi-shot to get an extra projectile. We have the accuracy stuff here just because we need to make sure our main hand accuracy is slightly higher than our maximum life. So you can see 3600 and 3532. So we are able to use precise technique, which is giving us 40% more damage. That's really good. And the attack speed and stuff on here doesn't actually matter. It actually kind of hurts to have. You actually kind of don't want attack speed because the faster you attack, the more mana you spend on Cyclone, and sometimes you can run out of mana. But that's another reason why we just like tap it, because if we're holding it down, we're spending more mana, and then yeah, just that's the whole tapping thing helps with that as well. We also get some extra prod speed from ballistics right there. We get movement speed and suppression stuff here. We have the life mastery for 15% increased max life if we have no life mods on our chest. And then marks and frenzy on hit against marked enemies. We have thick skin. Currently, I don't have full ailment avoidance, but you get 20% from thick skin cluster, and then you can get a bunch on your boots. And then I'll probably try to use the what's called Storm Shroud, the jewel that makes Storm Shroud, I think. The jewel that makes it so that your chance to avoid shock is applied to all elemental ailments. So that's a pretty good way to get ailment avoidance. And then, of course, we have the long shot, which is a bunch of prod speed, a bunch of damage as projectiles travel further, and then the 15% more prod speed mastery there. And then the, as I mentioned before, the onslaught stuff right here. So, and then we're anointing Fury Bolt. So yeah, that is the tree. And for other stuff we're running, Leap Slam, Frostblink, we have a bunch of stuff on life tap because our mana pool is so small right now. So we have like Frostblink, Sniper's Mark, Mark on hit, and then life tap. Yeah, so that's because Mark on hit has a 200% cost reservation multiplier, so it makes it hard to trigger your mark unless you've got quite a big, I mean, not that big, but a decent sized mana pool, which we don't have enough right now because of the reservation, so we use life tap there. And then I also have a Steel Skin automation set up with more duration and life tap as well. And then Pride, Flesh and Stone, Precision in the boots here. For our main links, so yeah, we have Cyclone of Tumult. We use a level 10 version because the mana cost is lower. If you go above level 10, the mana cost goes from 4 to 5. Which isn't that big a deal, but again, we don't really care about the damage from Cyclone itself, so we just run a lower level version, doesn't matter. Then we have Windburst support. Obviously, that's the whole build. More duration, brutality, vicious projectiles, and we don't care about that less projectile attack speed downside. And then greater volley. So greater volley is better than greater multiple projectiles because it has a lower, less projectile damage multiplier on it. And the behavior from Fury Bolts overrides the behavior from greater volley, so yeah, you end up with effectively the same projectile behavior that you would just get without having volley. And the tornadoes themselves from Windburst seem to move in kind of like a zigzag pattern, so they're kind of like random. They don't just move in a straight line or anything. They kind of like, it's not quite circular, but it's like they move in arcs basically. So even if you do volley them, they're still going to move out in like all directions pretty much. So yeah, that is pretty much the build. Oh yeah, I have Leap Slam as well. Brace, faster attacks, and then just some other random stuff that I'm not actually using. Like I'm not actually running Determination currently. I'm not really using... for a while I was using faster proj instead of greater volley support, but once you get enough increased projectile speed from your gear and from the tree and stuff like that, faster projectiles becomes less useful, but while leveling the build, it's pretty good. So yeah, that is the build. It's, sort of incomplete, but also I don't think I'm going to keep playing it too much longer. But I wanted to just showcase Windburst and kind of what you can do with it. I think there's a lot of unexplored potential for this skill. Because you can actually, so you can use it with bows, you can use it with any weapon, basically. I think you can even use it with wands. It's, you do want like a big flat damage slow weapon, probably. I tested and I don't think so. Windburst support does have the bow tag on it. I don't think it scales with additional arrows, or at least the tooltip doesn't update. So like here you can see it says in the tooltip, it says like projectile split towards 9 additional targets. When I tested with bows with a bow that has fire an additional arrow, it didn't increase that number of additional targets. So I don't think it works with like additional arrows from bows, but you can get a bunch of proj speed from bows. You can get pretty sizable base damage on a bow. So there is potential to do a bow build with this. However, you also have to, like you're not obviously not going to be able to cyclone with a bow, right? So you're going to have to like stop an attack with a bow skill probably to trigger it. I also messed around with like using something like Asenath's Mark, which is a helmet that triggers a spell every time you attack with a bow. So I was triggering movement spells, like Frostblink, or I tried Body Swap or Lightning Warp, stuff like that. It's pretty clunky, but it does technically work because it counts the distance that you travel with a movement skill towards the Windburst distance. So you don't actually have to run in order to trigger Windburst. You can use a movement skill. I know some people are using like Flicker Strike with this because Flicker Strike, you obviously move really quickly all over the place. I think it's probably worse for single target for Flicker Strike because unless you have insanely high attack speed, if you're on a target with a smaller hitbox, then you're not going to flicker very far. So it's not going to stack up the move, like it's not going to count you as having moved very far. But I think there's like definitely still some unexplored potential with Windburst. Some things you can do. Also, I was messing around with Bell Timber Blade, which is a sword, a one-handed sword that gives you +2 proj if you've used a movement skill recently, and it gives you Far Shot, which is a big more damage multiplier. So that definitely has potential with this skill. The only problem is it has relatively low base damage especially compared to something like a big two-hander. So you would probably want an additional source of like flat damage if you go that route, but there's definitely potential to do something with Bell Timber Blade. It also has pretty high attack speed, so you could do like a high attack speed flicker setup or something like that, probably. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to share kind of my findings around Windburst and kind of what I managed to do with it. I think there's some potential for this ability. I think especially for clearing and especially for indoor maps, it's good. But yeah, for bossing and like general mapping, I think it's too inconsistent. Unless the boss arena is tiny or you're in a closed area. But yeah, it's been fun for sure, especially just zooming around so fast. But yeah, that's the build. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.